So the DJI Pocket 3 was one of the most highly anticipated cameras of 2023. It built upon the success of the OG, keeping the very unique 3-axis physical image stabilization in this very small pocketable form factor, and it brings much needed upgrades, including a new 1-inch sensor and a bigger rotating display. So now that I've been using the camera for a couple of months, new cameras have hit the market that kind of compete with this. I wanted to revisit the camera, give you guys an updated perspective on it, and if I think it's still worth it in 2024. Alright, so here's my personal Pocket 3. Been using it for the past couple of months, and I use it pretty often and aggressively, and you can see that physically the build quality here, it's top notch. I don't see any scratches. The screen, just fine. The gimbal operates perfectly. So in terms of durability, this thing is top notch, especially compared to regular mirrorless cameras. It's much closer to something like an action camera when it comes to durability, although not quite as durable. It does come with a case, a very minimal kind of half case. It just slides in like so. I apologize, I only have one hand because my other hand is holding the microphone, but this is what it looks like in the case, and this is how I usually toss it into my backpack, and so far so good. To turn on the camera, you just rotate the display, a super satisfying motion, and you can see how fast the gimbal locks into place and the whole thing turns on. And speaking of responsiveness, the gimbal itself, as you can see, operates just beautifully. DJI, through their drones, have a ton of experience with gimbals, so if you're worried about the performance of the gimbal, I can tell you right now it is top notch. Now, the image quality on this thing, aside from the stabilization, has been probably the most impressive aspect of this camera. So it features a pretty massive upgrade from a 1/1.7-inch sensor found in the Pocket 2 all the way to a full 1-inch sensor on the Pocket 3. And the footage this thing produces just looks way better than it should. I mean, the footage is noticeably different than a smartphone action camera. It's much more like a mirrorless interchangeable lens camera. It just kind of gives off that vibe. I think a part of that, aside from the 1-inch image sensor, is f2.0 aperture, which allows you to have a shallow depth of field. That's definitely something more characteristic of a professional mirrorless camera. And the Pocket 3 can achieve that pro look absolutely flawlessly in this small little device with a built-in 3-axis gimbal. So the stabilization is fantastic, especially in low light, and the image quality via the 1-inch image sensor and the f2.0 aperture, it just looks so clean. Those are the two features that by far I've been appreciating the most while using this camera almost every single day. And since we're talking about things I like about this camera, the third major point here has to be the value. So the Pocket 3 is more expensive than the previous version, which is to be expected considering all of the major upgrades. But in the world of cameras, this is still really an unbeatable value for what you get. So it is hard to find comparable products to the Pocket 3. One of the closest has to be the Sony ZV-1. This is marketed towards the same kind of content creator audience. It has a 1-inch image sensor, and the price here is $750. So quite a difference there, and we don't even get a physical 3-axis gimbal. Now, with all that said, even though I'm a big fan of the Pocket 3, even now in 2024, it hasn't been perfect. The past couple months, there are some things that really annoy me about this camera. I don't think any of them are deal breakers, but it's definitely worth knowing if you're in the market to buy one of these in 2024. So one just annoying thing about the Pocket 3 is the module that you need to attach to this camera in order to mount it on a tripod, because on the body of the Pocket 3, you're going to see that there is no 1/4-inch tripod adapter. If you want to mount this on a tripod, you need to first attach this module, which adds about 1.5 inches to the overall length of this already very tall and slender body, which makes it just look kind of weird on a tripod. I mean, the last thing the Pocket 3 needs is to be even taller, in my opinion, and there's no reason why they couldn't just directly add a tripod mount to the Pocket itself. The second thing that kind of annoys me while using the Pocket 3 is the battery life. It isn't fantastic, possibly due to the physical gimbal, drawing power, the bigger display. I haven't timed how long the battery lasts when actually using it out in the field, but I just find it always kind of running low earlier than I would expect. It's not that big of a deal because the Pocket 3 allows you to charge while filming. But importantly, the Pocket 3 does have quick charging. So in just a couple of minutes of charging, you can get a pretty solid amount of juice back in the device. The next thing that's not perfect about the Pocket 3 is the display. So this whole flip screen thing is new for the Pocket 3, and it is a huge improvement over the super tiny square display found in the last generation model. However, the display itself, even though it looks fantastic, I love the flipping mechanism, it's high quality, it's still kind of small. So if you're trying to frame up a shot from kind of far away, you can see that the display being bigger would have been a positive. But I have to say, I really like how the gimbal complements having just one display. Usually this is a problem because you can't flip around the display and see yourself, but here you just flip around the gimbal instead. So I often use the Pocket 3 to film different products. And when doing this, the Pocket 3 is on a tripod, and I find that because of the gimbal, no matter where I put the tripod, it's often in kind of weird angles to get cool shots. I can always manage to have the display at least mostly facing me. So for instance, right now, if I try to pan all the way over to get that into the frame, I can't. But if I just rotate the gimbal and try to get it from this angle, now I can. So even though we just have one display, no matter where I put the camera, due to the versatility of the gimbal, I could always properly see the display. But there is one final shortcoming of this device, and it is by far the thing that's been urging me to potentially get a new camera. And that is the fixed focal length. Unfortunately, this camera does not have any physical zooming ability. It has a fixed focal length of 20 millimeters. Now, it does have a magnetic lens mounting system. It's mostly used for different filters, but there is a wide angle lens attachment. I have it, and it changes the focal length from 20 to 15 millimeters. It's nice and useful in some situations, but I really wish there was a telephoto lens equivalent, something that would change it from 20 to say 40 millimeters. Maybe this will exist at some point in the future. A third party will come out with something like this, but as of right now, it does not exist. And as mentioned, I use this camera a lot on a tripod for product shots, and not being able to zoom in really limits how dynamic of footage you can capture. And it results in me having to constantly reposition the camera itself closer and further away to change up my framing. But overall, I would say the Pocket 3 is still a phenomenal camera even in 2024. I mean, the camera is just super unique. There's nothing else quite like it that's this small, has a 1-inch image sensor, and a built-in 3-axis gimbal. The closest competitor has to be the Sony ZV-1. It has a 1-inch image sensor. There's some things I like about it over the Pocket 3, like the bigger display, as well as the zoom range. But that camera is significantly more expensive, $750, and it doesn't have a built-in 3-axis gimbal. Above all else, the image that the Pocket 3 produces is just so fantastic. It doesn't look like an action camera or a smartphone. It is much more comparable to an expensive mirrorless camera due to the shallow depth of field, the large 1-inch image sensor, and the stabilization just makes everything look super professional. But it's not perfect. I wish the display as well as the battery was a little bit bigger. The lack of a 1/4-inch tripod mount directly on the camera itself is just weird. And the lack of any kind of zoom, the fixed focal length, is probably my biggest complaint of the Pocket 3. It makes it a little bit more uncomfortable to use, but overall this camera is super unique and totally worth it in 2024. I'll leave an Amazon link to this product below. If you guys enjoyed, leave a like, subscribe, and I hope to see you guys in the next one.